Dear colleagues, we have to continue our work, and now we have a very interesting panel which is not directly associated to the association agreement but still is quite relevant to this topic. We will be talking about the Eastern Partnership key deliverables as a new comprehensive agenda and what is added value and synergy with association agreement. Although those of you who deal with Eastern Partnership maybe know about this joint staff working document, which is shortly called 20 Deliverables till 2020, which is about 4 priorities and then 20 case studies where all 6 partner countries have to deliver and show progress on the reforms and on the agenda of European integration. This document is quite interesting, and I think that many of the experts still wonder what is the level of overlapping of association agreement and these documents 20 deliverables. We in Ukraine, we have produced such kind of policy paper which was specifically devoted to this issue, and our diagnosis is quite clear. There is no simplistic picture about these cases, about these deliverables. Some of them overlap, some of them duplicate the association agreement, but some of them are quite new. So basically you can find this research near the registration desk, and you can go in depth and see what is the comparable base for all the 20 deliverables and association agreement and association agenda in Ukraine. We will start with discussion about maybe the philosophy behind all this document, because it appeared in the back in December 2016 and then was renovated in June 2017, and many issues appeared in renovated document. So my first question would be to Viktor Boykov, right? Boshkov, advisor to the Director Neighborhood East, DG for Neighborhood and Enlargement Negotiations of European Commission. So, Viktor, what is your assessment? What is the philosophy behind this document? Is it more political or is it more operational?
Thank you, Hennady. And please let me convey my director's excuses. There is at the moment in Brussels a ministerial, Eastern Partnership ministerial meeting on trade, which he had to attend, so that's why he couldn't be here, and I represent him. You're right, we are now about to mark the 10th anniversary of the Eastern Partnership, and in fact preparations are ongoing on how to do this, and this is a very good moment to take stock and maybe revamp the policy for the future period. I will just very briefly present you a small context, because I know you're all aware of it. In Riga Summit 2015, the 28 EU leaders plus the 6 EU leaders of the Eastern Partnership countries agreed on 4 priorities. You all know the 4 priority areas, which is economic governance, connectivity and society. Afterwards, we indeed adopted the document 20 deliverables for 2020. These documents are both living documents, and they are, as civil servants, these are our most relevant guiding principles. In last year, we had the Brussels summit, again, 28 EU leaders plus 6 EAP leaders. And at this meeting, which was November 2017, they reconfirmed their commitment to both the 4 priorities and to the 20 deliverables document. The 20 deliverables document was reissued, updated jointly by the 2 commissioners in charge. This is the Commissioner for Foreign Policy, Mogherini, and the Commissioner for Enlargement and Neighborhood, Hahn. And by doing this, they put a new architecture in place. And this new architecture, I think, is very important because it's somehow a governance mechanism of monitoring the implementation along the 2020 deliverables and the 4 priorities. And this architecture has 4 platforms. This is high-level meetings, 4 platforms, 3 panels, each platform, and at the bottom there are a lot of expert working groups. And the first round of meetings have already happened of the platforms, and trust me, it was not easy to organize. And now we're preparing the second round of such meetings. And of course, in all of this, we as EU officials are continually taking progress, taking stock of what we have achieved and what challenges lie ahead. And allow me just very briefly, maybe 3 examples per area to brief you on that. Before that, however, a quick bracket. In the new MFF, a new multi-financial framework is now coming along, you all know, for the next 7-year period after 2020. And the instrument for neighborhood is now being subsumed under a global instrument for external policy. And that has given some rise to concern whether the financial assistance available for the EAP countries will remain intact. And allow me to say that the negotiations have not been easy, but we have managed to ring-fence a budget of 22 billion for the whole of the neighborhood in the next MFF, in the next global instrument. Now, in terms of policy areas, I just want to give you a brief example of what we think has been achieved. In the economy area, the priority area number 1, we see a clear increase in trade, and this is not only among the countries of the region, but also between those countries and the European Union member states. We also have recently signed a Minsk agreement, and you all know how if a citizen is asked what is the value of you of the European Union, many say things that are close to their heart, and one of them, which is, I guess, close to all of us, is the reduction of roaming charges. So the Minsk agreement is now putting in place a policy of reducing regional roaming charges. And the third example in the area of economy is that half of the access of finance to businesses in the region is now in local currency, which is a huge facilitation for them. In the area of governance, we have the example of all the 3 DCFTA countries having adopted a public administration reform strategy. And of course, having followed the panels in the morning, we all know that adoption is not equal to implementation. But taking stock of what was said on the Western Balkans and the progress reports the Commission issues, for us, the adoption of a strategy is an important issue. It's an important first step, and we always take this into account. As a second example, and this is a very strong anti-corruption tool, is that all 3 countries in the area of economy have adopted the so-called e-asset declaration mechanism. And as a third example, all 3 countries participate in the CSDP missions of the European Union, which I see as an approximation of practice through working together. And in the area of connectivity, the examples I would give of achievements are that we have now a memorandum of understandings signed with all the Eastern Partnership countries in jointly defining the core transport networks. And Michael earlier in the morning said that the transport networks is one of the tools that we use to operate in these countries. As a second example, I would give, of course, the South Gas Corridor, and the key parts of it have now recently been inaugurated. I joined the Commissioner Šefčovič every year in Baku when the Advisory Council of the South Gas Corridor meets, and I know how difficult this has been. But now, we have now inaugurated key parts of this corridor, and I think this is very relevant for the case of Georgia. And as final example of connectivity, I would give the Energy Efficiency Initiative, which has led to improved legislation and improved infrastructure. And here, a concrete example is the fund that Ukraine recently established for energy efficiency of residential buildings. Finally, the final area, society, and this is the closest to my heart, I have to say, because there's a lot of education in it. We recently opened, Commissioner Hahn was in Georgia earlier this month, inaugurating what we call the Eastern Partnership European School. And this is a school that educates people from across the countries, young people, at high school level. And the prospect of this is to grow. Of course, the second example, and it was also mentioned in the morning, is the Erasmus Plus program, which has benefited thousands of young volunteers and researchers. We have the Young European Ambassadors Network, I guess many of you have heard. And of course, we have also set up the EU for Youth program, which helps disadvantaged people, young people, and also helps young entrepreneurs. And here we have, and I should maybe have brought it with me, we have this promotional video of a cafe in Minsk that is entirely staffed with disabled young people. And that coffee is really, really popular, coffee bar. Now, moving on concretely to the DCFTA, this was the 4 priorities report. Moving on concretely to DCFTA countries, they are uniquely placed to benefit from their association agreements precisely in terms of these priorities: economy, governance, connectivity and society. And for this reason, the European Union set up within our overall assistance package, we set out the so-called DCFTA facility. And the DCFTA facility provides funds of about 200 million only for these 3 countries. And this is on top of what Ukraine has as an allocation, which Peter spoke about earlier. And these 200 million are grants, EU grants, which help leverage about 2 billion of investment managed by the banks, the European Investment Bank and the EBRD. And they work in that area in support of several elements. I'll just outline 4. Risk-sharing mechanisms. This supports local banks. Currency hedging. This provides interest rate subsidies. This is all economy. Investment incentives in concrete production lines and processes for small and medium enterprises. And of course, technical assistance for business advice and capacity building. And in conclusion, since we have already spoken at length about Ukraine, let me just give a few examples of the DCFTA facility at work in the cases of Moldova and Georgia. In Moldova, we provide support to both administration and companies with the aim of improving the business environment, and more concretely, we provide strong support for the National Food Safety Agency, and that also goes for Georgia. There is a lot of support from the DCFTA facility on the so-called sanitary and phytosanitary measures, and it took me a while to figure this out, why this is relevant, until in my country we had an example that really brought it home to me. And sanitary and phytosanitary measures are basically standards of quality of food and of the possibility to export this food. And in Bulgaria recently, where I come from, we had an outbreak of some flu, which was contaging the birds, I think, the poultry. And at some point, a laboratory analysis came through that proved that yes, the outbreak exists, which local producers didn't trust. They didn't trust the agency, they didn't trust the government, and they didn't trust the laboratory analysis, so they didn't let people from the agency to go and verify the stock. And you can imagine what a political outbreak this had. And to finish in Georgia, another example of the DCFTA facility is a sector reform contract which aims at public procurement, and of course the support to the Georgian economy export potential. I'll stop here and then I'll be happy to participate in the discussion.
Thank you, Victor, for your examples of the deliverables which have some good progress on the track. Now I'd like to move to Krzysztof Babinski, who is co-chairing steering committee of Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum. But before that, organizers just hint me that there is a hashtag you can use while using your Twitter or Facebook, and just pose your questions or your ideas about what you hear during this panel. And of course, there is a stream on the web page and on the Facebook page of the Civil Synergy, so please share with your friends, and maybe they could engage our discussion. So Chris, the question sounds like that. I will cite two points from this monitoring we did in Ukraine on comparison of association agreement and 20 deliverables. The first is good news, that this document does not contain provisions that would conflict with association agreement. It's very good. And the second, in a significant number of cases, a joint staff working document targets, supplement, and elaborate on association agreement provisions. And one of that is structured engagement with a wide range of civil society organizations. So Civil Society Forum is mentioned directly in this deliverable. So I would like to ask you about other angle, being part of the deliverable, but at the same time being part of the watchdog and of the monitoring process. How do you see this document? Is it high on the agenda of the Civil Society Forum?
What, the watchdog function?
Second?
The watchdog function in the 2020 deliverables?
Right.
Yeah, no. That's the short answer. This is not an easy time at any conference, the first lot after after lunch, because everyone, I can feel that there's a sort of aura of sleep in the air. We have a big problem. We have another big problem in this panel, that we are all men. And just so that Gennady doesn't get criticized for this, I've decided to sacrifice myself and to ask you to think of me as a woman. Okay? That way we can say there was a woman in the panel. But go on, try. So that. And you only have to do it till 4 o'clock. I'll go back to my original persona then. Okay, so we've got the gender stuff out of the way. No, there isn't a watchdog function in the 2020 deliverables. Not really. What? Yes, maybe. What has to be said, and probably we all know this, so it's not terribly necessary to repeat it, but these are completely different documents. The association agreement, the treaty, is basically a mechanism for transposing the acquis into the legislation of the three countries, and it's basically what it is. It's the first step towards membership, and this is really what it's about. Of course, it'll change these countries, but it won't change these countries, I don't think, enough, because there is the problem of implementation. The 2020 deliverables are actually about changing these countries and about turning these countries into countries which are able to implement the acquis and to function inside the European Union once they join, if they join, as member states. And therefore, there really isn't that much, there is that synergy that one helps the other. Now, the 2020 deliverables are a very worthy document, which were put together by DG NEAR and by EAS probably, and they have aims and they have targets. It's not an incredibly ambitious program. And by ambition, I would define as saying that what we should be aiming for is to dismantle the oligarchic system in the Eastern Partnership countries, return power to the citizens through elections, and to legitimize the government which they elect, to establish the rule of law, and in effect have an independent judiciary which could look after the mechanisms in such a society. Now, if you define the aim of, say, all the efforts that we are all trying to make to reform our countries, the 2020 deliverables are not that ambitious. On the other hand, we should take them seriously. We are trying to implement them. They are also a document which has been put together by officials, and officials have this trait about them that they're wise enough not to put things too clearly, because if things don't come out as they thought they might want them to come out, then they can't be blamed. So there's a lot of vagueness in the 2020 deliverables, but that doesn't matter. It's a realistic approach. Of course, we're not going to get rid of the oligarchs by 2020, so there's no point in saying this in print. And it's a very grown-up, mature approach to transformation, I think. The two processes work side by side. There's another important difference, of course, that the treaties are for 3 countries and the deliverables are for 6 countries. And we mustn't actually forget about Armenia, which has hopefully a bright future ahead of it, and is probably, in a sense, it has an entirely legitimate government at the moment and a powerful will to try and transform the country. And Armenia also it has signed a DCFTA-style agreement, although it's less than a DCFTA. And we have to remember that the Armenians are going down this path. And then we have the Azeris, who are also signing an agreement with the European Commission, and with the European Union, and Belarus, which is also doing something on these lines. But I think we have to remember, I know this is a conference about the 3 DCFTA countries, But I think we have to remember that there are 6, and in a sense, the problems in all 6 countries are the same. So I think that's all I want to say about the two processes. And if I may, I'd like to say a little bit about the role of civil society, especially. I mean, with the 2020 deliverables, we try and help, and we try and do our best, and we go to the platform meetings, and we try and intervene, and we make suggestions, and the Ukrainian National Platform has produced this impressive document about what more could be done. But it's difficult to do more, because you have to understand, and I think you do, that once a program or a program has been put together by the Commission and by the various commissions, once all the compromises have been set and the priorities have been set, it's very difficult to change them, because you'd have to negotiate everything again. And the 2020 deliverables, even though it's vague, and in this sense that's a good thing, it doesn't actually, there's not much room for changing it. And if we have a situation like events in Armenia, actually Armenia really isn't covered by the 2020 deliverables. And it runs till 2020, as you can guess, because I'm repeating 2020 all the time. The problem here is that the commissioner will stop being the commissioner next year. Sometime a new person will come in, and we wonder what will happen to the 2020 deliverables if there's a new commissioner. Probably it will be allowed, the program will be allowed to run to its final destination. What happens after that, I don't know. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be thinking in a creative way about the 2020 deliverables, because these ideas will come in useful after 2020. But as I say, it's difficult to bring in changes into the program, but we can live with that as well. Now, I just wanted to say a few things about the DCFTA, the role of civil society in the DCFTA. As you all know, there is a mechanism for consultation and meetings with the European Union civil society. That's written into the treaty, and it's also written into the Armenian treaty as well, and it probably will be written into the other 2 treaties when they're put together. This is a mechanism which doesn't work at all, because on the civil society side, it works in the sense that there are people, there's a civil society platform has been put together in Ukraine, and you are lucky enough to have funds to oil that and make that work. But you don't, and I don't know what's happening in Moldova. I mean, research is being done, but the civil society as such, I don't think is involved. And Georgia as well, I'm not sure. I mean, you're doing projects, but it's not. I had imagined that this would be a place where the progress of the association treaty agreements would be kind of discussed, and it could be used as a place where we could push for, civil society could push for solutions and criticize and praise and blame. This isn't happening, I don't think, at all. Also, I thought it would be a place where the messages could be passed to the government of the country. In fact, I think that civil society has different ways of talking to the government. Actually, I don't think that mechanism, which is written into the treaty, is working all that well. And part of the problem is the European Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC, which is a very, very old and tired body, which has procedures whose main aim is to allow ECOSOC to survive. They have this feeling that if they change their procedures, they will fall apart. And it doesn't, they have this thing, and you probably know this, they have this thing where everything has to be done in threes. And they always, anything they do, they have to have 3 business people, 3 trade union people, and 3 people whom they call the others. And the others is non-governmental organizations and anything else that comes along. But everything has to be in threes. So there was enormous struggle when we were putting this together, when they demanded that the partner countries should also produce everything in threes. So there was I remember, I think the Ukrainian wanted to have about 30 people involved. And he was like, no way, you can only have 9. And they have to be 3 trade unionists, 3 business people, and 3 others. And that was a big, Alexander Sushko fought a good fight to get that right. My experience of going to there are 2 meetings of these every year between the, say, Moldova and ECOSOC. And ECOSOC does this because it knows that its future depends on it, because it's one of the things that it does. It does these consultation meetings, but their heart really isn't in it. They don't, their members, it's very difficult for their members to come. They don't all always come, so they don't have 9. All that they seem to do is that produce 4 papers a year. There are 4 papers are written, 2 by each side a year, and these are sort of discussed. This is not a lively place, and I think in a sense it's just done because it has to be done. I was actually thinking that maybe the Moldovan meeting, the next one, should sort of demand that something should happen about the rule of law in Moldova and make trouble for the government. But this isn't happening up till now. So that consultation part is not working, and civil society isn't in that sense really involved in this process, and that leads into talking to society about the DCFTAs. The civil society here is not really a channel for selling these treaties and the content of these treaties. Maybe I should stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Krzysztof. And the picture is not very bright of civil society participation, but still I think we could address this question to Kaha Gulishvili, who is co-chairing the Georgia EU Civil Society Platform and who is Senior Fellow of Georgian Foundation for Strategic and International Studies. Kaha, from your point of view, what is the real cloud of this platform, and do you participate in process of consultations? And maybe referring to this document of 20 deliverables, in our document we found that delivery on DCFTA implementation is valid in that way. A half of its targets will be an outcome of the implementation of association agreement. I think the same story is about Georgia. So what do you think about your participation in consultation, in monitoring, and do you plan to monitor 20 deliverables in Georgia?
Yes, it's working. Thank you very much, first of all, for inviting here, organizers, I think, and the question, of course, is important. Indeed, I would like to remind that the issue of civil society platforms will be considered during the side event, which is planned more in details. So I will, of course, respond to your question, but also I wanted to elaborate a little bit regarding the 2020 deliverables. Civil society platform is an important institution, important endeavor. It's an only institutional commitment, let's say legal commitment between European Union and partner states that civil society will be given a role. Civil society will play as an actor in the process of association of these countries, and it empowers civil society with the legal rights as an association agreement for Georgia, for example, and for any other country. It's like a law according to our constitution. So it empowers legally the civil society to put their nose in these affairs, saying a little bit simply. So to engage and to demand from the government providing information, to deal with the parliament, to other bodies, official bodies, and somehow be really legally engaged. This is very good. But second, I agree with Chris that there are some problems with approaches, that this is a bit conservative approach, of course, from side of EU, to shape in the same way. All countries are different and with different problems. For example, if in some countries trade unions are, and the issues of trade unions or social partners are very important, more important or problematic than in other countries. Maybe this is more or less resolved, so there is need for other things, for example, environment or energy or some other issues to be more focused on the dialogue. So it would be, of course, better if the representation from side of European Union is more wider, and that the EU represents more civil society, more wider spectrum of civil society organizations. From our side, there was also attempt to include more organizations, wider spectrum of civil society in the dialogue. Finally, we found compromise, and fortunately, there was understanding from side of the people who were assigned from the Economic and Social Committee, and we found a compromise. We have now 18 people participating in the dialogue, but 9, 3 plus 3 plus 3, they're officially empowered to vote. But others participate also in the dialogue. But from side of EU, of course, usually we have 3, 4, 5 people participating in the dialogue, and this is not complete, of course, number. Finally, what about the consultations? I wouldn't say that for example, Georgia, which I am presiding from Georgian side, is very active in carrying out consultations with the government all the time, etc. I understand that all experts involved in our dialogue, they are members of the national platform. So national platform is the main body which is mentioned in the association agreement as a counterpart to this Economic and Social Committee, and they elect these experts. So finally, the national platform itself of Georgia is very active in dealing with the government. So it's not necessary that as a body or half body, so Georgian part of civil society platform, also tries to establish its own very active channel. I know that in Ukraine it's in different way. Ukraine is a very big country, so it can afford. And in Georgia it's a little bit, there is no so much space for so many actors, but we are practically cooperating and consulting, carrying out consultations with the government and parliament within the national platform, and then taking this information to this civil society platform. This were very briefly, but of course I will talk more during this side event about these issues. As regards to deliverables 2020, it's always interesting to understand why new forms of frameworks, or not even frameworks, but new types of cooperation mechanisms are introduced, and I trust the European Commission. Everybody is critical about the European Commission, lots of people and experts also, but I trust that anything is done by European Commission usually is done on purpose and because this is really necessary. And in this sense, I can say that, of course, to make the process of Eastern Partnership more result-oriented, there was a need to introduce something. There was a need to introduce a list of midterm objectives and midterm goals. So to narrow the scope of issues that Eastern Partnership covers. And this was done, I think, in order to make more result-oriented and more easier to monitor also, and easier to engage all actors in this process. And this was done. Finally, we see that not all issues that are envisaged by association agreements or by Eastern Partnership format and platforms and other commitments from Eastern Partnership have been included in this. And this is right also. The prioritization is quite good. I think that economic development and market opportunities, strengthening institutions and good governance, connectivity, energy, environment, climate change, and mobility and people-to-people contacts. But here, of course, I can say that if we compare with association agreements, association agreement covers much more sectoral issues. And only 3-4 issues, sectoral issues, were included in this. It is understandable that association agreements with the countries, they not only association but Armenian agreement also, which is not association agreement but very comprehensive framework agreement also. They include, of course, their own system of monitoring through cooperation council, through association council, association committees, etc. And it's not necessary to monitor everything in one, by one instrument and by process. So I agree also on that. Just is interesting thing that in this instrument or in the mechanism, I don't know what to say about document deliverables 2020, the intra-regional cooperation issues or deepening regional cooperation and multilateral dimension of the EAP or issues related to this dimension EAP and bilateral topics are not separated. They're put just together. And this is little bit maybe, to my view, not very correct. So it would be better to separate clearly. For example, I tried to separate and I saw that there are 5-6 topics out of 20. For example, more engagement with civil society organizations. This is multilateral topic, of course, and this goes through civil society forum, other organizational networks, etc., or harmonization of digital markets. This is multilateral issues too. So harmonization means not only harmonization with European Union of digital markets, but also intra space. It would be, of course, encouraged. Support intra-regional trade among partner countries, it's absolutely multilateral issue. And some others, for example, development of the trans-European networks. Georgia cannot develop it without cooperation with Azerbaijan or Armenia or other countries. This is multilateral. But these are mixed, like in this, if these were not different type of issues. Development of SME, development of environmental policy, etc. These are typically bilateral issues between EU and the concrete country, and very well described in association agreements, and by the way, wider, the scope is wider, much wider. I would like to stress one issue also here. This is issue of the 3 associated countries. And this, I understand difficulty that the European Commission field is faced, how to separate, because they actually deep integration, economic integration going on with association agreement having countries. And the other countries, this is to put in one document and formulate like one goal or one type of objective for deliverables 2020 for all 6 countries. It's very difficult. And we see somewhere that DCFTA is mentioned, and in description of the document is mentioned DCFTA, it's focusing on DCFTA countries. This is some kind of inconvenience, of course, because we see that the European Union and the European Commission, including institutions, they hesitate very much to make clear cut between these 2 approaches. Also, I understand politically reason of this, that not discourage the other 3 countries and trying to engage them, and also interregional engagement. But finally, there is no way. There is necessity for these 3 countries to be somehow forming with European Union a separate, not taking them out from EAP and create something. But inside of EAP, it could be created a separate framework for them. And then all kind of questions related, would it be this CFTA or something, should be focused and should be involved in this concrete framework related to only of that. To my view, there is necessity to create a panel, separate panel for DCFTA, for associated countries. And here I also mentioned that, to my view, there is no term for these countries. When we say associated countries, that Turkey and Morocco and others, also Egypt, they are associated countries too. So I think we need also to separate these 3 countries and say something. I would call them newly associated countries to separate from others. But they can, till some 10 years, you can be newly associated countries. After 10 years, maybe we will become candidate countries. Because if you call them Eastern European associated countries, then the abbreviation will be exactly EEAS. And it will coincide with the European External Action Service. So it's absolutely not possible. So you should call something. And for them to develop different format of cooperation, panel, for example. Now we know that today there is informal ministerial meeting between, yes, 3 countries. This is very good that actually decisions from the last Eastern Partnership Summit, they started implemented. But why make it informal if there is possibility to make it formal and say that there are 3 countries, associated countries, they are inside participating in Eastern Partnership, but they have right also to have a separate, because all 3 of them have very clear ambition to become closer to European Union. This should be, I think, in such documents, this should be more clearly communicated. And finally, I think there are lots of things to say, of course, about this. Don't forget about the term newly associated states, and I advocate for this, that we are called this kind of. But finally, also important thing that the objectives and goals which are introduced in such documents for all 6 countries, they shouldn't have a bottom of depth because of the countries with weaker integrative ambition. I think that there should be some possibility that other countries which have real integration ambition, they can be working on a more deeper issues and digging deeper in relations with European Union. And now the final thing that I repeat, lots of, and yesterday also experts and officials, they touched upon issue of regional cooperation, regional economic cooperation, or regional trade cooperation formats for these 3 associated states. I think it's absolutely important, and the European Union should start seriously working with these 3 countries on establishment of a type of regional trade area, free trade area between Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine. And not just regional trade area, but to replicate something like it was a Visegrad group, for example, which had lots of aims, not only free trade area, but these 3 countries should aid and should help each other and should encourage each other. Also should feel that they are together on European integration issues, everything which is related to European integration, and this should be encouraged.
Thank you very much for the observations from cell study from newly associated countries. I hope Victor have noticed this term.
Maybe recently.
Yeah.
The abbreviation is very...
We can discuss it later, maybe on side event. But now I would like to turn to Julian Groza, who is executive... Julian Groza, Executive Director of the Institute for European Policies and Reforms from Moldova. Julian, you said that you are now involved in monitoring of these 20 deliverables in Moldova. And I think that, I assume there will be a big overlapping between 2 documents, association agreement and these deliverables. Some of norms are supplementing, some of them are more liberating on some issues. But if to turn from bilateral track to multilateral, or maybe this regional format Kaha was mentioning about 3 countries, do you see there is a platform or room for discussing these deliverables in 3? And if so, what deliverables could you just mention in this regard?
Thank you very much, Gennady. Much has been said already, so I'll try to be brief to leave some room for questions and discussion. Thank you for the question. I would like to turn a bit your question to the origin of these deliverables. First, we should not be so critical about those targets that have been set in the 2020 deliverables. I think they have been as ambitious as possible in order to be implementable by 2020. First, and they're very much tied to the financial instrument. And third, I mean, whatever it's written in the deliverables, it's not the ceiling. I mean, everything is open. Yes, there is a tendency of leveling the opportunities for all 6 countries, but definitely you can see differentiation in between the 3 associated countries and the rest. And the difference is in fact lying into the how ambitious these targets are towards these 3 countries. Because the deliverables which are set, the targets which are set there, they already have been discussed for some years before they have been approved. So, to my view, again, we should not consider these deliverables as something that is set as a ceiling. I think there is a lot of opportunities to be explored among the 3 associated countries that can be done jointly. And there are many examples that can be set for us as deliverables for the 3 associated countries, not only in terms of valuing the opportunities of DCFTA with the DCFTA facility, but going into more practical things like having a plane from Chisinau to Tbilisi. We have a plane to Kiev, which is good, but having a plane to Tbilisi, it will be even better. So to see opportunities how to connect these 3 countries, that's very much important. Roaming tariffs, it's another example that we can do among ourselves and jointly look for opportunities to do that together with the European Union. So again, we can set for ourselves other deliverables if we are if we have that ambition, because opportunities are there. My next point I wanted to make is that we have to treat the deliverables as a complementary tool to the association agreement. Association agreements have their own implementation tools, targets if you want, set in the association agenda, which are very much linked to the reform agenda, internal agenda, while the deliverables are more something, an attempt to make Eastern Partnership more concrete in terms of what can be delivered, what can be done in realistic terms. And if you judge, I mean, we have not passed even 1 year since the deliverables have been approved. But I think the tendency is good, at least on EU side, the opportunities are provided, and even the meeting today in Brussels that provides opportunity for 3 DCFTA countries to talk more in depth about other opportunities that can be explored in the DCFTA is another example. So these are the few points I wanted to make, and the final point I wanted to underline is that it's very much everything depends on not only on the ambition for all these 3 countries, but also on the level of political will level, the will of political. The political will to which extent the cooperation among these 3 associated countries can be extended, and already to think of what can be done beyond 2020. I think we will reach the point next year when we will have kind of midterm review of these 2020 deliverables, and already at that moment, we should already think what can be done using the new financial tool that EU now is discussing, with all its positives and negatives, because now we will not have a separate, basically, tool for the Eastern Partnership, for the Eastern Neighborhood. It will be a broader context. So with this, there may be more opportunities for us if, again, we can deliver on what we have committed. I think these are the few points I wanted to make, and then we can continue in discussion. Thank you.
Iran, thank you very much. And I would like to open the floor. If you have comments, questions, please. Just name yourself and whom you want to address.
Thank you, Claudius Manokas. So to me, these key deliverables, they represent a kind of developmental path of this of the policy, and it's a good basically thing. It gives really what is needed. I mean, to these countries. But it's a question whether, I mean, this developmental path exactly could be linked, I mean, to this path of association reforms and so on. That's exactly what was the subject of previous also panel. So that's my question to you. I mean, don't you think this should be linked somehow together better? And indeed, this is now, I mean, the very fact that it's not connected, I mean, is hardly good, is hardly conductive to make, you know, reforms. That's a thing. So I see it, for example, I mean, in terms of, let's say, transport. I mean, let's imagine, I mean, so, or energy. So transport, I mean, a key makes sense. I mean, which is basically about safety on roads and everything, makes sense if you have good roads. If the purpose is to finally, political policy purpose is to reduce deaths on roads, which is basically about the key in all transport, not only roads, in fact, then if you implement it and you have bad roads, it doesn't make sense. People will be killed on the roads because of bad roads, not because of good safety rules. Yeah? So that's the way I see the connection, basically. If you do certain things, you have safety or you have energy, a key implemented, I don't know, gas or electricity. I mean, you have infrastructural, basically, component to it. Because without infrastructure, these rules, market rules, they simply doesn't make sense. So what would be your take? Thank you.
Hello once again. My name is Darius Jarolis. I also want to raise one issue, but a little bit differently. I'm sorry if I misunderstood what Krzysztof was saying, but I tried to imagine you as a woman and somehow didn't get your point. You said that civil society platforms don't have much to do in DCFTA. And I spent a little bit of time analyzing how EU-Ukraine civil society platform, at least the Ukrainian national part, is working. And here I would like to thank Zoriana and Dmitro for this very long, I think 3 or 4 hour long discussion in January, on a long evening. But I then understood that there is something missing in it, that both the EU and national civil society platforms really don't discuss adaptation, which is borne by whatever business associations, maybe also trade unions could be involved in that. So you are discussing, I understand, everything but that. And I have also some concrete examples from my work, which we sort of did as a side product for Ukrainian Association of Light Industry, Sukurlekprom. We also helped them also by involving them to develop a guide about how Ukrainian apparel industry could adopt to the norms arising from implementing of association agreement and therefore boost the export potential. And there were really 3 concrete issues. So if I can briefly share. One is that the biggest problem is not adaptation per se, but shadow economy. So there is no level playing field among Ukrainian businesses, which discourages clean businesses, so to speak, to operate. And second, the two issues directly related to implementation of association agreement are change of standards from GOST to voluntary standards based on European and international standards. And also there was one particular Ukraine, and I'm not sure whether it's pertinent to Georgia or Moldova, since Ukraine has a lot of infrastructure, quality infrastructure. They wanted to upgrade the businesses were ready to invest into upgrade of laboratories. So it's not a request for you technical or whatever assistance in this, but they wanted to get accreditation in Europe so that at least part of those certification, quality certification could be done in Ukraine. So my question is, this is I see as a sort of concrete implementation related issues which could or should be addressed through all these forums as well in order to raise them with the European Commission, national governments if needed. I don't know where this discussion is taking place because the head of this Ukrainian association, when I asked, well, so do you contribute to a civil society platform? So what is that? What is that? So I'm not saying that there will be easy to find a common denominator, but it's not these are not small issues, and also related to assistance. One problem with assistance, and that's why you don't perhaps get much out of it as you could, is I read somewhere this term it's not multiplex. It's mostly to the governments, so the institutions. Now civil society is included as a mandatory component, but businesses are left aside even if we're talking about things like which really affect them, like roadworthiness or whatever. And from the list of participants, we don't really have any representatives of businesses from any of the countries, and they are the ones who will have to bear the cost of adaptation. So this is something which I found strikingly absent from the platforms. So discussing everything and anything but the real issues of implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the third question, please, there.
Dennis Chanusha, Expert Group, Chisinau. Well, I have personal experience related to working in the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum, and I should say that in the Working Group 3, which is related to energy security as well, we have the Deliverables 2020 as let's say as a blueprint, and then we try to develop projects which are related to specific measures. So I should say that we have enough arguments in order to agree with the idea that civil society is doing something in promoting Deliverables 2020. More than that, at the local level, Expert Group, IPRE, and other institutions are actively involved in developing different tools for the government. For example, we developed specific criteria for measuring the impact of DCFTA. So yesterday, when Daniela Morar was mentioning about civil society developing criteria, so it was about us and about the idea that government needs argument in order to sell DCFTA idea. So we are trying to do that, and I think that civil society is trying to do with very little resources a lot. What is really missing, and here is maybe a question remark, is that we are missing financial resources. And as I know from DG NEAR, there is an idea to use to untap the resources that EU delegations have in each of EAP countries, so that civil society could use in specific crisis moment their support, financial support. I don't know at which stage is this idea, but I know that it exists. And secondly is that we have overlapping of platforms. We have the civil society platform, then we have the development advisory group, which is functional only 1 time per year or 2 times per year when we are meeting to report about the results. So I think that with the small resources that we have, we could operationalize and maybe less overlapping, more cohesion, and using those tools which are disposable right now. I believe that we are complaining more than thinking about creative ways to use what we have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nils, for the ray of sun in the discussion. Yeah. So I think we could turn back to our panelists, and then there would be the second round of questions and comments. So, Victor, what's your take on the first question?
There's no button here. It works. Okay. Yes, I will go to the first question, but let me first very briefly say something about the last question. In every country, we have the so-called bilateral envelope, and this envelope is programmed through the so-called annual program. And this annual program is always structured along the 4 priorities. You know, we try to introduce some order in our office work doing so. And you're right, there have been recently an idea which will translate into a decision that within every annual program, bilateral annual program for every country, 10% of the amount will be earmarked for cross-cutting issues, i.e. outside of the 4. And these 2 cross-cutting issues are roughly 5% each. One of them is civil society, and the other one is strategic communication, because we have started to, and this relates back to my cigarette talk with Julian, that we have, we're lacking into, we need to increase that in order to be more, to basically to show our impact in the ground. Now, on the question about the link between the 20 deliverables and the association agreements, I have to say, you know, we face a certain political environment, and if you look from the side of the EU, and when I say the EU, I don't mean the Commission, or the EAS, or the Member States, or the European Parliament, or the ECOSOC, or the Committee of the Regions, but all these together, which makes it even more complicated. What do you want to achieve in the neighborhood? You want to achieve economic development, you want to achieve peace and prosperity, you want to achieve connectivity. I mean, these 4 areas of priority are not chaotic, they're pretty well structured. You want to achieve good governance, you want to achieve a more robust society. So, but then looking out, you see a context in which it's not easy to operate with one mechanism only. And to illustrate the point, and bear with me, I'll open a bracket, I'll go back in time and in geography to the Western Balkans. When Kosovo declared independence, that was a very hot potato. And Kosovo was not even on the ladder of the enlargement perspective. It starts with a feasibility study. That's how it all starts for a country that has the European perspective and wants to be a member and wants to negotiate. It starts with a feasibility study which is prepared by the Commission on the mandate of the member states. And we invent. We as European Union bureaucrats, we are forced to invent when the political circumstances are fuzzy. And I remember very clearly, this was 10 years ago, when we proposed to the member states that the Commission be given a mandate to undertake a study on the feasibility of Kosovo's European perspective. You can see the play of words. It's not a feasibility study, but it's a study on the feasibility study, and on the feasibility of Kosovo. The same with the country that we cannot call Macedonia. For a long time, Skopje was blocked for starting negotiations. We all know why. Now we have some opening, hopefully this month. And then the Commission, again, the bureaucrats, came up with an alternative solution, which is called, the abbreviation is a very unfortunate. Abbreviation is always tricky. It's called the High-Level Accession Dialogue, and you all know what the abbreviation means in Slavic languages. And that's basically negotiations without calling them negotiations. You still have formats, you still discuss issues with the acquis communautaire, but you call it a high-level accession dialogue. So the same here. You know, you have the European Union in all its complexity, which tries to achieve a certain target in the Eastern Partnership countries, and it looks out and it sees 6 countries, all of them having a different level of political ambition, a different level of political will, a different constellation. Some want to sign an association agreement, perfect, let's go for it, but some don't. And that's how I see the link. I'm sorry, it took me a long time to come to the point, but association agreements for the 3, 20 deliverables 2020 for the 6. You cannot exclude the other 3. And At the moment we have with Armenia, now it entered into force this year, it's called SEPA, remind me, Comprehensive Extended Partnership Agreement.
Maybe
Enhanced Partnership Agreement. So you have, instead of Association Council with Armenia, you have a Cooperation Council. It reminds me of the HLAD with Macedonia, or the study on the feasibility with Kosovo. We are now negotiating such an agreement with Azerbaijan. With Belarus, we are this close of signing the partnership priorities later this year, hopefully, at a high-level summit. So, if this happens, if we have association agreements / something with all the 6 countries, maybe then the 20 deliverables for 2020 will cease to exist. The need to have them will cease. And I think, you know, as 2020 approaches, maybe that's what will happen, but I don't know. So I think that's the relation, the ambition, and I finish here, I promise. The reviewed European neighborhood policy, which kicked in 2 years ago. If you read the founding document of that renewed policy, the key word there is differentiation. You match the ambition of the countries. And I think the only reason why the Armenian agreement is not called association is because Armenia is part of another association context, and the word doesn't match. Anyway, sorry to take so long.
Should I ask this question?
Yes, please.
Your question about whether this mechanism is a conduit for concerns from industry or from business. The association agreement, as I'm sure you know, has a number of consultative and bodies. There's the council, then there's a parliamentary meeting, there's something called the DAG, which I never was sure what it was, but it's domestic advisory group, and then there's this civil society thing with ECOSOC. And this, in theory, should provide a lot of information coming in from concerned citizens about the problems they might face, and these will be resolved and put into the whole mechanism. Well, I don't know about the others, but and I haven't been going to the ECOSOC, the civil society platform meetings for about a year or more. Partly also because we don't have any money in the civil society forum for this, actually. So there's no support for this kind of involvement. But from what I could see then, was that the people on the ECOSOC side, which is supposed to represent civil society from the member states, were members of ECOSOC, and then there were people who were lobbyists in Brussels, who came along in Brussels. They don't travel. They come along to be nice to ECOSOC because this is a way into the institutions for them. So they're not there because they care about Moldova or Georgia. They're there because they care about their links with ECOSOC, which will help them get into other institutions to pursue their own aims. So if there's a meeting in Brussels, these people will be there from Business Europe or whatever they're called, those kind of people. If you go to Tbilisi, they won't be there. There'll be a couple of trade unionists whom I admire, actually, because they're very professional. And then there would be someone like me, or I don't know who's going now from the Civil Society Forum. And these are very formalized meetings. And I don't know, Rihanna, you'll maybe correct me. But I've never seen anyone come up with saying the Lighting Industry Association in Moldova has said that they're worried about the plugs will be the wrong dimension and they will go bankrupt on this association. I thought this would work, actually. I thought this was the place where these concerns could be voiced, both the political concerns and the economic concerns and business people, etc. I don't think this is happening. Is it happening? It's not happening, is it? No, it's not happening. And it should be happening, but for it to happen, there would have to be a secretariat and a whole machine of people because there are lots of concerns. But but it's essential, actually. I know I'm talking unrealistically, but it is essential because this is the place where business people can voice their concerns, and their concerns form the basis of the disquiet about the whole process. If it's a political process, goes to a referendum, they will be saying, well, this isn't going to do us any good. So these things have to be resolved there and then. And these mechanisms, these things, are the places to resolve. Now, they're not being resolved. So I agree with you. What we do about it, probably more money. Thank you. Do you want to say something?
Yes, thank you. First, relations between association and I would react also and this to deliverables 2020. I just stress my opinion that there should be very clearly divided these bilateral and multilateral issues related topics which help to develop intra-regional cooperation or some directions of activities which are beneficial for all of them, and that actions are to be taken together. This is one thing, and others, second is bilateral. And in terms of bilateral, of course, there could not be full coincidence between association agreement and deliverables 2020. I agree absolutely. That's why I think that for associated countries, there is need, again, for a smaller but proper multilateral mechanism. Again, that if deliverables 2020 are for only 6 countries and they have certain sailing that we don't go to the issues related to other more deep things, it means that 3 associated countries remain without specific questions of their trilateral interest related to European integration, and less focused on these issues. So this is my opinion about it. Second is what I react also on the Darius' question. It's not like that businesses are not important or trade unions are not important. This is very important. We understand that in EU there is a more precise understanding of civil society being, first of all, represented by social partners, first of all, and then all other actors are also civil society. But if you look to European documents and all kind of sources from Europe, you see that social partners are first denominated as civil society. In so-called former Soviet Union countries, or in Eastern Europe, for us, notion of civil society is still a little bit different. We understand that civil societies, these are watchdogs, these are experts, academicians, teachers, etc. Those who are active, but trade unions and businesses, we don't consider very much civil society. We understand that they have some very specific, not very wide, they don't follow so-called the overall society interest or societal interest, I would say, but a particularist more interest. So we consider in different ways. That's why there is some contradiction when we were negotiating this creation of, with European part, creation of this association platform, a bilateral platform. There was absolutely misunderstanding between us. We wanted to include so many people from different, so many organizations from different spheres, and they wanted to include only 3 from different spheres, but other 6 should be social partners. So this means business, and so finally what happens, that I agree absolutely with Chris, this one thing is, okay, finally we can agree, 3-3-3 formula. But even this doesn't work, so it's formalistic, because finally we don't see really any businesses during this meeting. And we see only people from different trade unions. Very nice people, very supportive, and very good cooperation we have with them. But we want to be more, we have more material results, so to touch and to talk to people who are doing things in their own. So. But finally, I want to say that the resolutions we adopt or declarations we adopt, they cover practically all issues related to association agreement, and we reach this understanding with these people. So it's ambivalent. I have some ambivalent views about this. But of course, as regards to issues of the CFTA, nobody disregards these days. There is in civil society forum, if you go there to multilateral cooperation, there is very strong group or a second group on economic integration and always being in civil society forum as such, and also in national platforms there. And lots of people from including businesses, less, of course, businesses, but representatives of business associations participate in that. And
maybe we
yeah,
go to another round of
and
questions.
third question was
From Denis.
sorry.
From Denis.
Yes, regarding, I wanted to react to this. I don't consider that there are that these overlaps. We can call these overlaps. I am in favor of having as much as possible structures for cooperation. So more structures we have for cooperation from civil society side, and more possibilities for cooperation, talking, dialogue, etc. with European Union, it's better. Well, we have civil society forum, of course, these are about multilateral issues. We have civil society platform, it's bilateral cooperation between EU and us. But as regards to development assistance group, this is also a very important institution. There is possibility to bring other people, and these people concentrate on issues of sustainable development in concrete. I would create much more other groups, saying frankly, and I don't see overlap because civil society forum is a multilateral body, and it is concerned about multilateral issues, and this is compromised decisions they take. Finally, it is compromises between all actors. But as regards to development assistance group or association platform, this is bilateral, and interest of Georgia only represented in there, not all 6 countries, etc. So this is my opinion.
Thank you, Kaha. Thank you. And since Zaremchuk was mentioned for several times, I wonder if you want to react briefly to what was said about Ukrainian platform, just to close this question.
Yes, I just wanted to, I don't know whether I should go into deep detail. Frankly speaking, I'm very much surprised because as organizers, we did not meant this panel to be discussing the differences or overlapping among the platforms. It was meant to focus on the Eastern Partnership added value after all. Yes, and actually we, just a short announcement, if you haven't looked into the agenda, we will have a special event in the end on the platforms and other forms of civil society participation in the association agreement implementation. But we do have 2 types of platforms, and actually our project is designed to support both of them, and as is written in its title, it has to seek synergies between the platforms, not trying to create competition. And that's what we do, and I guess Gennady, as national coordinator of the Eastern Partnership Civil Society platform, would agree that we have found a way to find niche for both platforms, to find the areas of expertise. And I fully agree with Denise that I mean, those who want to work would find a way to work. Those who want to complain would find many reasons to complain. And the bilateral platform, with all its negative inborn aspects, I think still has a serious role to play, and it has played a role because of its status. It's now really taken seriously by the government. It's seen as an actor, an important actor to be consulted, and it's within the process. It cannot be moved out of it. And I think this is already a big accomplishment, and we have just to fill it in with more work, more good policy analysis, more good discussions like we have today. And I mean, there is room for all, and there is room for all those interested in progressing in the associations agreement, in implementing the key deliverables. So let's focus on opportunities rather than complaining about.
Thank you.
Deficiencies.
And next round of questions, maybe on opportunities. There was a question from the first row, from you.
It has been very extensively discussed, but nevertheless, from Georgia, as I said, I'm the member of parliament. I chair the European Integration Committee, and since the cooperation with civil society and the role and the engagement with platform and the forum has been discussed, I wanted to come in with what could be presented as the perspective from the national parliament. We value very much the cooperation we have with the civil society because we get very important feedback on many different things. It is important in terms of legislative drafting process, but also even more important when we do exercise parliamentary oversight over the executive. However, what is difficult is that there is indeed certain confusion on the ground with the different kinds of platforms and frameworks that exist there. I fully agree that they should not compete, and I don't see them competing, but it is a little bit confusing from the national authority end. Because we have the agreement, for example, between the European Integration Committee of the Parliament of Georgia and the national platform, there is a memorandum of cooperation based on which we cooperate, and that means that every time there is a new law coming to the committee, we immediately send it to the national platform. National platform has 186 NGOs as members, and then it is up to them to circulate it among those members that specialize in the issues which relate to the subject of the law, and then they get back to us with the comments and recommendations, and they also have the chance to participate in the committee hearing, which are always public, and they can present their views and etc. And we find it is for the parliament's purposes very good practice. We value this very much. It happens often that we do not get comments, but there is always an opportunity for comments. It also happens that we get comments which we are not able to share, but there is always the room for discussion. So that is something we value very much, but at the same time, there is a lot, and in addition to the two frameworks that I mentioned, which is the Civil Society Forum, which also delivers recommendations, which we're always ready to review together, and in addition to the national platform, there are also informal coalitions in Georgia that also monitor and do shadow reports on the implementation of the association agreement. And we in Parliament also invite them and do thematic sessions together with other thematic committees where we review the work. But we have to do it in a way which is practical, and we have to do it in a way which doesn't overburden us to the level where we're not able to consume the resources that are available. So let's concentrate, do it a little bit better on all ends, on the civil society and on the parliament end. And I would just wish that, I think there is a good experience in terms of building cooperation between parliament and civil society in this process. But I do not really see how this cooperation is going with the executive government and the civil society. And we are trying also to see whether we can promote greater engagement of the civil society, or the government, I should say, with the civil society existing platforms.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that national platform from Ukrainian side of Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum could share our experience of cooperation with authorities, with public authorities, and executive branch, but it would be like on the side event. I think we could just leave for that time span. If there are any questions on deliverables and association agreement, please raise it. If not, I give our panelists 1 or 2 minutes for final remarks, please.
Thank you very much, Gennady. I would like to conclude by once again underlining that there is a clear complementarity between the deliverables and what we need to implement in our association agreements. The deliverables are those targets which are very much connected to the financial framework of the European Union, and they're an attempt for giving flesh to our cooperation within the Eastern Partnership. And otherwise, the sky is the limit, because, for example, Georgia is now discussing about government to college sessions, which would go basically in another format of dialogue, a more structured dialogue between Commission and the government, which provides new opportunities, and that is not a deliverable in the EAP 2020 deliverable, but Georgia managed to advance. Why? Because Georgia has proved that they are able and willing to deliver. So this is why I believe that we should not consider that deliverables as some kind of a ceiling. I think it's rather an opportunity offered to other three countries, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Belarus, to be in the loop of the objectives of the Eastern Partnership. One more point I wanted to make, probably while reviewing these deliverables and probably when setting new targets after 2020, given the developments that we have in the region and possible development that may have happened until 2020, one should really think of not only targets in a sense of positive, but also kind of bottom lines or red lines, because these deliverables do not address democracy standards. And we see in countries, including like Moldova, we are going to a process which is really very much connected to deteriorating the democracy principles, functioning democracy, rule of law, and that is accompanied by consequences applied through strict conditionality. Again, when thinking of deliverables after 2020, one should, if you want a more clear link between the association agreement and deliverables, we should also think of kind of bottom lines. And talking about bottom lines, again, I mean, we have raised, the civil society in Moldova and Ukraine has raised the issue of hydropower plant on the river Dniester, for example. And we're talking about human security. We talk about energy as well, but one should not kind of go at the expense of the other. And issues like this should be also addressed in a sense that when we talk about deliverables, we also should think about things which would help bridging societies, communities, contribute to development, but not undermine the current state of affairs in our countries. So I think in that sense, one should also think about these deliverables in the perspective of basically mid to long-term development. And again, the sky is the limit, and everything is up to the ambition of each country, to the pace of reforms, to the pace of results. So the more we will be able to deliver on what we have committed in the association agreement, the faster will be for us to further integrate into the European Union. And if we do that all together in three countries, yes, maybe after 2020 we can have a 3AA format, which will be more zoomed in, but that should be accompanied with more conditionalities and democracy standards, because values, as we have seen, are even more important on the long run for the objective of transformation of our countries.
Thank you. Kaha? Please, very brief, because we...
Yes, I will be short. One thing is that it shouldn't be understood that rapprochement and integration and cooperation between three associated states and their collective rapprochement to European Union is something contradictory to the development of EAP as such, and cooperation, regional cooperation between Eastern partner countries. For us, for Georgians, for example, it's absolutely necessary that Armenia and Azerbaijan go as much closer as possible to EU, that they take all what EU advises to them and they develop into democratic states, etc., etc. This increases possibilities for Georgia to integrate with European Union, if egoistically speaking, as regards to Georgia. And the other thing is connectivity, lots of other things. So without overall development, Europeanization of the whole, this region of Eastern Europe, it's difficult to imagine that the separately countries will become attractive for European Union. The further integration will be possible. This is one thing. So I consider this as a differentiation between these groups of countries inside of Eastern Partnership should not harm also whole Eastern Partnership from its cooperation with European Union, for sure, as a principle. And second thing, as regards to the deliverables, I don't know what will be deliverables after 2020, But I think that Eastern Partnership deliverables, each topic of the deliverables of Eastern Partnership should touch upon multilateral issues, so which are interests of all 6 countries and which involve cooperation between these countries, which involve deepening of integration between these countries, etc., etc. And all other issues should be put on bilateral agenda between European Union and, for example, human rights, to my view, is not should not be really issue, or rule of law even, or administrative reform should not be issue of deliverables 2020, which are for whole region. These are bilateral issues between European Union and this particular country, and they can be deep in a way that the country is ready for, at the extent, to the extent that the country is ready. This is absolutely that I believe in. And
the very final point.
yes, yes, yes. Okay, okay. This is. I will finish here.
I have the microphone, and you won't be able to continue. I want to apologize to Zoriana for talking about the wrong subject in this panel, and I promise I won't do this again. No. And all I want to say is that I'm glad that I'm very happy and grateful to be invited to this event, because I always thought that this was something that we should be talking, the 3 countries should be talking together about their progress and sharing experiences and helping each other. And I think, you know, stronger together. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm tempted to generously cede my time to the coffee break, but just one remark. I really think it cannot be stressed strongly enough the importance of regional cooperation. I'll just give one example from the 2000s. My own country, approaching membership into the European Union in 2005-06, was at some point considering to be much ahead of Romania on many counts. And we had a minister, I won't name names, who very unwisely stated openly that maybe we should not join together with Romania, we should join alone, because we are much advanced on a number of counts. As it turns out, that was the case then, and is not the case maybe in later years, but that was a completely counterproductive statement. And yes, I think this example really shows that definitely it's in the interest of Georgia that Armenia and Azerbaijan are together, cooperating also with Georgia. Definitely in the interest of Bulgaria that Serbia becomes a member state as soon as possible. There is no question about this. So, yeah, I'll finish here. Regional cooperation, very important.
Thank you very much. I think we've done a double job, because we have a panel with 2 topics, and we managed to cover all of these topics extensively. But just keeping wrapping up on deliverables and association agreement, I think that there is still room for all 3 countries, and I think that security could be that regional dimension that could work for all 3 countries. And I think that within this document, it shouldn't be only as a deliverable 1 of 20. It should be 1 of 4 or 5 priorities, like economic development, like governance, like people-to-people contacts, mobility. I think this is the real need of our countries to have more political interest to this extent, and I think we could elaborate in form of 3. But I think this is a good first discussion in Ukraine about this complementarity of 2 documents, and I think that next year there would be the next audit or the next monitoring, and there would be more interactions and more indicators of success, both on bilateral level and in terms of region. Thank you very much.